Hello everyone, MrSnowman here, and we're playing Obliteration on Gillis Peak. And we're going to use the F2000 in the beginning because I just don't have time to swap weapon. Anyway, so what we were talking about last episode was basically Battlefield 1. The new Battlefield that's coming out. It's gonna be about World War One, and I have no problem with that. It's just I don't think, that the game will be played as, people that actually like World War One and is interested in historic combat wants it to be played, because World War One was basically trench warfare. You sit and camp in your trench until the enemy comes running for you, and then you shoot him in the face. And then vice versa, you rush their trench and die to a machine gun or a rifle or grenade or artillery. It was kind of stupid, It's kind of stupid warfare, but that's how they did it, and it was a question of manpower. How much manpower a country has, and that was the question really. But I don't really see how DICE is going to make a World War One game that isn't going to be a stalemate, because you don't want the game to be a stalemate, right? You want to push objectives, make progress, and actually do stuff, move around, and but you can't do that really, because in World War One it was open fields. The fight was not in towns. They were in open fields with trenches and snipers guarding every position. And that's how it was really, a stalemate. And I don't see how that's going to be fun to play. I mean, it's like playing this game. Putting 64 players versus 64 players on a little small alleyway. That is kind of what it's going to be. Oh, I got knifed. Jesus Christ, I knew he was behind me. I actually thought maybe I should look behind me. Yeah, well, good job. Anyway, so I don't think necessarily that Battlefield 1 will be a bad game. Maybe they can do, miracles. DICE has done miracles with this game and Battlefield 3, so I'm pretty sure they can do it with that as well. But the problem with Battlefield 1 will probably not be the netcode. It will probably be the game in its own right and how it's played, because, obviously World War One was a stalemate and everyone camped, and people want good stats, right? And so people that likes to push objectives will have a much harder time than those actually playing, actually play the waiting game and just sit and wait for people. If it's trenches, if there is trenches that, is available to be blown up, like by levelation, like in this game, you can blow up a dam and destroy a lot of people. If you can call in artillery and blow pieces of the trenches away, it would be fun, or if it's like in Verdun, a few trenches are destroyed and the trenches are very close to each other. The enemy trench and your trench can be very close. If that is it, that will work, but it will not be realistic at all. Because the trenches were probably, a good amount of feet and meters away from each other. They were very separated. Not very, but enough to not, you couldn't throw a stone into the other team's trench. That was not it. No. It was kind of a lot far away. And so, yeah. I don't see how that is, it's cool. It's cool for people that's interested in history and, how the battle was actually fought. But then again, it is not really a fun game to play in that regard, because, you'll just be sitting there. And so if they can make it so that you can move along, then, the game will be a stalemate and be like the real world World War One. And that's, players don't, I don't think, yeah, maybe me, because I'm interested in how the, stuff was actually worked out in real life. I would probably enjoy playing that just because of having the feel to, how it felt like to be in a trench with your buddies dying all around you, and that's an enemy! Come on, die! And so, I would probably be interested in buying the game. I would probably buy the game just to have the feel, but then again you have Verdun, which I talked about in last episode, and my dog is going nuts. Probably some neighbors walking by or something, because my dog is an idiot. And so that is, you know, obviously the game could be good. The game could very much be good, but I'm not seeing the, you know, I'm not seeing the major FPS lovers and Battlefield lovers grabbing onto the game. Because they're, you know, we want tanks, not bulky tanks from World War One necessarily. And, you know, the tanks weren't quick in World War One. They were kind of like boxes made of metal and very, very bulky and hard to drive. Not very comfortable, not very good combat efficiency in general. It was just an evolution. It was just an evolution. It was the beginning of what we now know as tanks. And, you know, and our tanks nowadays are pretty cool. They're kind of, you know, most of them are quite easy to drive. It doesn't require, you know, that, you know, humongous amount of training. Yeah, and they're quite reliable, and, you know, they can take a few hits. But, and tank battles weren't really the thing in World War One. As long as far as I know, there were not a lot of tank versus tank engagements. And, you know, tank versus tank engagements in this game is kind of cool, you know, because they're kind of hard, and, you know, it requires a specific skill set that I don't have because I'm an idiot. But those battles are cool. You can use infrared, you can use AP rounds and such stuff. AP rounds and armor piercing stuff was not really, you know, there were plans upon this, as far as I know. There were a few things going around, and people said, maybe we can make armor-piercing rounds for the infantry, so the infantry can shoot down tanks. That sounds cool. Mobile artillery, but, you know, as a bazooka. But that was not really a thing until World War II, and World War II is a complete different story, because then, you know, then tanks were actually an effective choice of weaponry against most things. And, yeah. And in World War One, not really so much. I mean, if Battlefield wants to make a World War One game, fine. But, you know, I don't see the need of it. People love World War II shooters. Everyone I've seen going on, I actually look for a World War II shooter that's, you know, quite updated and, you know, has pretty graphics. And those just doesn't exist. I don't know why we have, why Battlefield and, for instance, Call of Duty hasn't made a comeback to that yet. Why is that? We're in a lack of a good World War II shooter, and here DICE comes along and brings us World War One, which is cool. I like it. I like the idea. But how are they gonna do it? Like, I've been trying to, like, think up good ways to balance the shit, and, you know, but I'm confused really with DICE's decision here to, oh my god, to make a World War One game. When, you know, World War One was cool, admit, you know, it was kind of interesting, but the combat wasn't really, you know, what you might think it was. It wasn't, and it wasn't necessarily tank battles, and it wasn't like fighting for rooms like in Stalingrad World War II. It wasn't, you know, fighting close quarter combat necessarily, and it was pretty much about sitting. Obviously, there were close quarter combat situations in World War One as well, while storming a trench, for instance. But that, you know, that was so rare because obviously the machine gun was invented in World War One, and, you know, those were defensive mountains. Nothing went past it. You just picked up your head, and then you had your head in a bag. It was pretty much that. The machine gun really increased the amount of firepower that the infantryman could have at his disposal, but not on him as a personal weapon. Basically as a deployment weapon. No, not a deployment weapon. What am I talking about? I'm an idiot. Like for defensive purposes only. You couldn't carry a Maxim machine gun on your own. That was kind of... The Maxim machine gun was a heavy piece of engineering. And then obviously, you know, the submachine gun, the MP18 and the Thompson were invented during the time. MP18 saw combat, Thompson never did, really. And the MP18 obviously was deemed pretty much the first submachine gun that gave the soldier more firepower than he had ever received before, and that was kind of cool. That was revolutionary for its time, used in something that the Germans called stormtroopers, basically lightweight and very, lightly equipped troops with MP-18s to storm trenches and stuff like that. And that's what they did. And they did it very successfully. Obviously, not really took like trenches and they didn't really. I have no clue. Maybe they took a few trenches. No idea, but they were very effective, and that's how they basically broke out of this trench warfare in World War II. They gave the soldiers a lot of close quarter combat the weapons instead of giving them rifles. Gave them an edge in urban warfare, and the warfare was much quicker because you had trucks and cars and tanks that moved faster than, humans and horses. So I'm really interested in seeing if DICE can pull this one off. I have some faith in them. Maybe they can actually make this to a very, very attractive game. I will definitely keep you updated about this, because this is something that's rather interesting. But seriously though, who would honestly see a World War II shooter rather than a World War I shooter? I would rather see a World War II shooter, because I know that people will play it, because everyone has heard about the Second World War, the Nazis, the Japanese Empire, and, the US rise to power, and Britain's struggle, and, all of this stuff. North African campaign, and, all of this stuff, D-Day, it's all there, and why do you think this war, Second World War, had so many operations and so many fronts and stuff? It's because the warfare was much more efficient than in First World War. And I will die here because there is just too much people. Because I don't mean that I like to see people dying, but it was a much better war. Because you killed more people, so as a war it was more successful than, First World War. And, obviously as I said, I don't support the fact that war, it killed a lot of people, and I'm like, yeah, hell yeah, everyone's gonna get killed. And I got knifed for the second time this match, Jesus Christ. And so, and First World War, you did see a lot of people die, obviously. There were lots of casualties in that war, even though it was kind of slow played. But, artillery did its job, and, I'm saying, and too much right now. Okay. Well, that's what I'm thinking. That's my whole ordeal with this. Is that World War I was a little bit, it was a little bit slow compared to all people, people in this game, and, in general, first-person shooters playstyle. It's a little bit slow, It's a slow played war. It was very much, damn it. It was very much sitting and waiting, and then going for an attack, and then basically run back to your hole again. It was a lot of that in reality, but in a game it can be different, and obviously it will probably be very different, and tanks will be much more powerful and stuff to balance the whole thing out. But it's I don't really agree with their decision to make a First World War game when, most people would like to see a Second World War game, because all people should have heard about the Second World War. Rather than, they probably heard about the First World War as well. But, the Second World War was just, in a gaming perspective, it's probably better to make a game out of that, because, it was movement, it was quick, and everything was happening quickly. Wars were basically fought in days, not in years. No, battles were fought, in days rather than years. And you know, that's more toward what, you know, the first person shooter guy wants. Maybe I'm completely wrong here. Maybe people want to have a slow play game because everyone is tired of, you know, just pushing objectives, getting stuff done. Maybe that's the thing. I don't know. I have no idea. But what I've seen, I was looking like for Kickstarter projects in gaming basically because I didn't find any World War II shooter was being developed. And so I stumbled upon everyone is saying like we should probably make a. Why is no one taking this seriously? Like no one is trying to make a World War II shooter. Why is this? And they just armed the last objective that we have, and that's bad. And that kind of stunned me. Like, why has no one listened? We've been crying, at least I have been crying, and I've seen a lot of people do this, cry for a World War II shooter. But obviously, if DICE can make a World War I shooter work, props to them. But I probably am not interested in the game at first. I will see other people play it and I will judge decision after that, or if they release more material on the fact. Anyway, hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and as always, have a beautiful day.